So I'm from South Texas, and my sister, who's 10 years older than me, with my niece and nephew, lived down there. And I used to go visit every 6 months to try to stay in touch with them and keep a relationship with my niece and nephew. And also to keep like some kind of connection to the South, because it was home for a very long time, and I have a lot of family down there. But I lived in Michigan at the time. I was 16. I had a boyfriend 17. I had a boyfriend of 3 years, and it was hard to be away, but it was good to be with family. So I'm in South Texas. Shenanigans ensue. There's some biker rallies. The gypsies were there. I spilled some beer. There was it was a wild time. It was a good time. Anyhow, I get back, and my boyfriend, prom's coming up, in the next 6 months from that moment. And we had talked about wearing pink to prom, and just joking around, because I was always so tomboyish, and he obviously didn't like pink but thought it would be funny. Anyway, I get back and I hear a story about him at some fire somewhere, and he kissed a girl while I was gone, and my teenage heart broke in 1,000 pieces. So I wrote him a letter, front and back, 5 pages, just like in Friends. And I was like, hey, I want you to read this letter. He's kind of avoiding me since I'd been back from Texas. I was expecting him to my girlfriend's back, yay, So I force him at lunch to read this letter, and he doesn't even react, and it's me basically being like, this is what I heard. Do you have feelings for somebody else? Is there something going on? And I asked him, I said, do you even care? And I said, well, do you? And he said, no, I don't. I don't care about this. I don't have time for this. I want to go back to class. And I was like, well, then we're done. And I broke up with him. I was heartbroken. He's like, good. Everybody will know you broke up with me. Turns out him and that girl started dating very soon after. So I was sad teenage girl. But I started talking more to this cute guy that was in a lot of my classes. He was a class ahead of me, and he was like, I heard what happened with your ex, and man, small school, he's like, that guy's crazy. He's crazy. How does a man get to your heart? And I was like, I'm heartbroken, so I'm like, he just doesn't, and he was begging me, please tell me how a man can get to your heart. And I said, fine, a guy who wears pink. Meanwhile, on my end, every night I went home, I was so sick to my stomach. Everything made me sick. Everything made me puke. Every time I ate made me puke. I was having blood in the toilet, and there was something really wrong. So I was going to the doctor a lot, and then I would come to school when I wasn't at the doctor's or wasn't doing all my extracurriculars, and seeing my ex-boyfriend in the hallway pass on by with the girl who was a class younger than us, flirting and laughing away. And this guy, he came to school every day for a week in a different pink shirt. He borrowed shirts from girls. He borrowed shirts from his guy friends. Most of them were pink polos. He wore pink every single day. And he was in track and field. He was a tall, lanky dude, goofy, nerdy. I knew he was super into World of Warcraft. Not my usual type, but great grades, good guy, I just kind of laughed him off and kept going. And they actually sat us down at some point. It was like, we need to consider that this may be something more. My mom wouldn't accept it. She said, let's get her checked out for gallbladder. And my gallbladder, I guess, had just ceased to work. It wasn't that I had stones or something. It stopped. The organ failed, and I needed it removed. So I went through surgery, and I was only 17. They said I was the youngest in hospital history to have my gallbladder removed at such a young age. I know in between all of this, I was heartbroken, and I was sad, and I was crying a lot, and I felt bad for myself for having to go through surgery so young. I came back from it, and I was back to school, I could still see my ex roaming the halls with that girl, and I would be sick in the bathrooms and trying to hide it on my hands and knees, dirty. Just this horrible, retching feeling. And this boy was in my gym class, the same one who wore pink every week, was so excited I was back at school. And so I got myself out in dodgeball in gym class that we shared as quickly as possible so I could go sit and not care. And he was like, Mandy, I'll get you back in. You know, he's on my team. And so he's running and jumping. He's like, watch me. And he's like doing all these crazy like tricks to like knock people out. And he's trying to get them to throw a ball his way so he can catch it and get me back in the game. I don't want to be in the game. Man, I'm tired. I'm grumpy. I'm depressed. I just had surgery. My ex is roaming the hallways with a new girl. Like, I'm sad right now. But there he goes, jumping like a gazelle. I remember I was like, you're like a freaking gazelle right now. He's like, right though? Just all sprung and spry and joyful. A couple days later, you know, one of his, and this, I mean, I guess this goes on for weeks. A lot of flirtation. I remember I was in the hallway and I saw him. He was doing some hallway work with the science class we had to pass through. I said, vote for me, 2023. I don't remember. I think I was just trying to rhyme, and he said he'd vote for me, and then we came back around again, and he was like, there's that girl, look. He was telling somebody else. I was like, whatever. So one of his friends comes up to me, and he says, hey, what would you do if you know who asked you out to prom? I immediately was flooded with all the plans that I had with my ex. I was worried if he was going to do the same plans that I had heard he was going to anyway. It was a small school. Everybody hears everything. And I was like, well, I'm not really planning on going. And if he wanted to take me, he would probably have to ask me himself. He's like, okay, well, I think he's going to ask you next week. What would you say? I was like, did he ask you to come ask me? He's like, I don't know. It was so high school. I was like, I don't know. He'd have to ask me if he wants an answer. I'm getting a little bit excited. And, you know, I started thinking about it that night, and I wrote about it in my journal. I was like, maybe I give the nice guy a try. Give him a shot. So I got dressed up really nice, and nicer than usual. It took a little longer in my hair, you know, a little longer in my makeup. Put on something maybe brighter. And I went to school that morning, and I looked for his car in the parking lot. It wasn't there. He always parked in the same spot. Big CC on the hood of his car because he was in cross country. But he wasn't there, and I thought, oh, that sucks. You know, I was kind of looking forward to bumping into him in one of our 3 classes we had together. And so all the teachers were called to the library, and the library had a lot of windows for walls, so you could see in, and they looked really distraught. They were really, really upset. Some of them were even crying. So I went into my science class, and I looked at his seat, and my teacher came in, and the teacher's aide walked around and gave us all candy. And they said, well, we have something that we need to tell you. I'm not going to use their name, but they said that morning, that boy who wore pink, he died in a head-on collision coming to school. I was 17. He had a full scholarship to MSU because he just broke records. He was the fastest little fucker you ever met. And I never really got to tell him that I cared about him, or that I thought about him that way, and that I was starting to love him in the ways that a teenager can. So they had grief counselors in the school, I remember I went out into the hallway, I was crying, and I ran into a friend who knew him well,